I'd like to welcome everyone to our event this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our Professional Advisors featured speaker event this morning, hosted, of course, by the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. As many of you may know, I am Larry Franco, a member of the Community Foundation's Board of Directors, and I also serve as board liaison to the Professional Advisor Council. As professional advisors, all of you play an important role in ensuring that your clients' goals are achieved. We recognize how valuable your time is, and it is our intention and hope today that you will take away new ideas and strategies that can benefit the work you do with your clients. A key goal of the Community Foundation is to be the preeminent resource on charitable giving for professional advisors in Western New York, and that you think of us as your trusted partner when working with your clients to find solutions to their charitable goals. So it is our hope that today you will learn a few concepts and approaches that may improve your ability to work with your clients. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Braddock, Director of Gift Planning. She's going to briefly talk about how the Community Foundation partners with the professional advisory community and their clients before introducing our speaker. Mary?
Great, thank you, Larry. And I also want to welcome all of you this morning. And while we had anticipated that this would be an in-person event when we were planning it earlier this year, we definitely appreciate the new and kind of unique and creative ways we've all found to connect with each other during these unique times. So last year, the Community Foundation celebrated its centennial anniversary, and we're grateful for the important relationships we've had with advisors and clients throughout those 100 years. And the Western New York community has definitely benefited from that generosity. As many of you guys have experienced firsthand, the Community Foundation offers flexible, customized solutions to help our clients to maximize their giving now and forever. As we all know, every individual, couple, family, and organization has distinct values and wishes that drive their giving. The Community Foundation can help them to establish a legacy in their names forever, or assist their children or grandchildren. Let me switch it over. Technical difficulty here. Or assist their children and grandchildren with continuing a tradition of giving, or increase their charitable buying power and reduce the administrative responsibility of maximizing their charitable dollars. Working closely with advisors and clients, we can be a philanthropic partner to make the process of giving easier, more efficient, and more impactful. And clients have many options when considering how to fund their philanthropy during their lifetime and after. And while cash is an option, and there are many examples, as you well know, where that may make sense, non-cash assets can create significant and often untapped opportunities for clients. We're fortunate to have with us one of the premier experts in the field on non-cash assets and how they can be great options for charitable giving in a client's overall financial and legacy plans. And Bryan Clontz is founder and president of Charitable Solutions, an LLC, is joining us to present on the topic of creative charitable giving with non-cash assets. Charitable Solutions LLC specializes in non-cash asset receipt and liquidation among many other areas. And as you'll see from Bryan's bio, it's got a great deal of experience across the philanthropic spectrum. And the Community Foundation has been fortunate in years past to work with Bryan, and we're excited that you will have the opportunity now to hear from Bryan today. So welcome, Bryan, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much, and very glad to be here. I did want to be there in person. I mentioned to Betsy I do have some PTSD. The last time I came to Buffalo, I think in person, I got stuck in an airport. Only time in my life, travel all the time, but I had to sleep in a rocking chair at Reagan National. So I wanted to come there. I did, but I did have some flashbacks that were not very good. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As that's coming over as well, let's see, where did it go? There we go. I do want to say, sort of tagging on to Mary's comments, I was actually at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta for a while, and when I was there, many people don't realize that 90% of all of our donors came to us as referrals from their professional advisors, 90%. The other 10% came as referrals from existing donors who had originally come to us from their professional advisors. We literally did nothing around development for 6 years other than, just as Mary said, being the partner to advisors in an unbiased way in terms of if they were planning something or selling something, if there was a charitable component, to see what might be the best fit either internally with us or if there were other outside providers that would be better. So there is nothing that helps community foundations grow faster than having deep, committed, trusting relationships with professional advisors. And I'm well aware, in fact, I even talk about, I shouldn't tell you this, but your community foundation sort of nationally known in a number of areas. And so you should be very, very proud about, frankly, what you have built as an individual advisor and sort of your overall community, but over the 100 years for what impact that's had, frankly, that but for that would not be anywhere close to the amount that you're able to support your sort of Western New York service area today. So just sort of a little quick side point. They did not pay me to say that, but whatever. So we're going to talk about now creative charitable planning with non-cash assets. This is my thing, so I get very sort of animated and excited. And there'll definitely be, I hope, some takeaways that will be very helpful to you more broadly, but certainly to specific clients as well. So if I'm on an airplane, which I haven't been on for a while, which is fantastic, by the way, and somebody says, what do you do for a living? I usually do not want to talk to anybody on an airplane. So usually I say, what can you say to immediately shut them down? You can say, I'm a life insurance agent, and they will shut down. So you can go from Buffalo to Shanghai. It's a library the entire way. It's a 40-hour class, not that difficult. You can get your license, and it's human repellent for the rest of your life. So I would strongly advise, if you're not insurance licensed, just get that, because it's sort of, to me, worth it. Or if I do want to talk to them, which I don't, I would say I help wealthy people give weird things to charity. And then they are in their DNA compelled to then respond with, well, what's the weirdest thing? And I'm talking for 20 minutes. Well, that's what we're going to do. So that's the whole session today. So we're going to talk about non-cash assets. To be very, very clear, you already know this, but we're not talking about cash, so you figure that out. But we're also not talking about any kind of liquid asset. So no publicly traded stock, no mutual funds. So really we're talking about non-cash, illiquid gifts beyond cash, beyond stock on the balance sheet. So that's going to be the point of today's call. So I've got four sort of primary agenda items. I am probably overly informal, I'll just say. So if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat, Q&A. If Mary or Betsy like, hey, why didn't you see that one? May not have seen it, just interrupt me. And I'll do some pauses, obviously, between some of the slides too. So typically just take those questions sort of as I go. And then I know we have about 5 minutes or so at the end. I'll be passing it back to Mary too. So the other thing I wanted to include in here too, given our time, is a couple case studies as well. So I'll go through a couple case studies that will hopefully illuminate some of the key points here. So market overview, types, what I call the 5-minute non-cash tax seminar, so some of the tax ramifications and things just to be aware of. And then at least the reasons why initially about 80% of non-cash gifts when offered to charities are declined. And so the real question is, why would that be the case? Now, I see a chat thing popping up. I'll let you guys maybe take a look at that as I go through. My guess is, okay, it's probably from Betsy, okay. Usually the first one is in the first 3 minutes is, are we going to get the slides? So I don't know if that's the one, but I may be clairvoyant. But yes, I'll be able to send the slides out. Mary already has those, so she'll be able to send them out to the rest of the group. And it's surprising to me that you don't want to look at the recording over and over and over. You just want the slides, but you'll make that maybe determination at the end of this session, so we'll see. So here we go, sort of right out of the gate, a very key sort of level setting point. So first is more than half of affluent investors' assets are not in cash or in publicly traded stocks. So right out of the gate, very important point, cash represents 6 to 8% of high net worth household assets. That, by the way, in 2007, pre-2008, 2009 fund was 3 to 4%. So I think we all have a very different definition of what liquidity is today than we certainly did then. Whatever, that percentage doubled. It's still the smallest piece of their overall balance sheet. Census data just came out the first part of this year, and it shows 3% is the average cash percentage of the average household's assets. Crazy small. You then look at the aggregate stock market value. This keeps moving on me finally in a good way. but 28 trillion-ish, might be 30 trillion, whatever, but that's if you take all publicly traded stock and you mush them on all exchanges. Obviously, that includes mutual funds, et cetera. About roughly 28, 30 trillion. By the way, very depressing side point, that's about our current national debt. That means you'd have to sell every single publicly traded company in the entire company, no capital gains tax, because that'll screw the math up, and you'd still barely be able to pay the national debt. So anyway, I digress in a sad way. So that's 30 trillion. The non-cash market, real estate, privately held business interests, all kinds of other weird things your clients own and you probably own, 55 to 65 trillion. What does that mean? It's double that of the entire stock market. $390 billion in donations given last year. That's sort of in the aggregate, sort of all donations in all forms. About 6 to 8%, depends on the study, would be in these non-cash illiquid forms. So it's right now, and this is, I'm going to sort of drive this point home. First, cash bad, everything else good. Cash is almost always the worst way to certainly make a significant charitable gift because it's the smallest piece of their overall balance sheet, which I've already hit that a number of times. From a tax perspective, it's almost always the least efficient and least optimal, and it hurts their lifestyle the most when they actually make the gift. So where do you think 90% plus of all the gifts in this country come from? Cash. It is craziness. And so the hope for our next 45 or so minutes together is to expand your thinking, I would suggest with love, a lot more than you think coming in. I might ask this question at the end about the possibilities of other types of assets that can be particularly conducive for charitable giving, in particular in partnership with your community foundation during life or through life income gifts or estate gifts, and doing that in such a way that your clients can give a lot more than otherwise they thought possible. So on 6 to 8%, when you think about that as a percentage, that's kind of dinky. But if you sort of nominalize it, let's just say roughly 400 billion, let's say roughly, 7% there at the midpoint, that means $28 billion donated in illiquid gifts in 1 year. Now, all of a sudden, that's chunky. That becomes a much larger sort of conversation. And these are not small type gifts. And some of these actually are occurring that you may or may not even be aware of, but you know of the gift. So a quick example, if I'm on the plane and I don't want to talk to the person, life insurance agent, or if I weren't so cheap, which I am, I would go out and buy the Bose headsets, and I put the Bose headsets on and noise canceling, all that stuff. Well, Dr. Bose went to MIT, got his PhD there, taught there, evidently likes MIT. And I want to say it was about 10 years ago, he liked MIT so much that he gave 50.1% of the Bose Corporation to MIT. And people's like, wow, that's kind of a neat gift. It sounds so neat. It's about $1.4 to $1.6 billion, one shot, one gift, closely held C corporation. When, and this gets a little touchy, but I'll say it anyway, so when The Social Network, the movie, came out, that did not make Mr. Zuckerberg look very good in that movie. And usually about a third of people can remember that movie, but the bottom line is that was not a good sort of movie for them. And so what do? This is weird, in life to try to repair any sort of reputational damage. And there's this very specific, tangible place that you go. This is very weird to me. You find Oprah and you find her couch and you beeline it to her couch. And that was a week later on her couch. And he announced a $100 million gift to the New Jersey public school system. And if I have a big group, this is so weird to me, a third of people can remember the movie The Social Network, and about 40 to 50% of people can remember the charitable gift announcement. And I'm like, that's called good PR, because that's what was supposed to happen. Say, a decade later, I want them to remember the gift more than the movie. They nailed it. So what he did was he gave $100 million to the New Jersey public school system, right? No, he gave pre-IPO closely held Facebook stock over to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, to a donor-advised fund. When that went into the IPO, which did not go so well as many of you might remember, sold for no capital gains tax at all out of his estate for estate tax purposes, of course. And then he was able to use those grants over time as they met certain benchmarks. Then he would release those grants through his fund there. That's how that gift worked. That's the behind the scenes. And there is, I could say this 40 times and you won't believe me, there is nothing that the Silicon Valley Community Foundation can do that your community foundation can't do. Zero difference. Same legal structure, tax, everything is exactly the same. The point is that was the behind the scenes of using closely held C corporation stock to fund a gift that many people have heard about, but they didn't know that that was the sort of back end from a tax optimization or efficiency standpoint. So this, I love this chart. I've just added this to my slides. This came out maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago. So Federal Reserve puts this out, and it shows in all kinds of colorful ways how different assets are allocated in terms of the average asset mix by net worth. So you have sort of, let me get my little pointer here. So 10,000. I really look at the sort of 1 million to 10 million as being sort of the core typical tier for community foundations. Again, either lifetime gifts or testamentary. It can be less than that, obviously. It can be more than that, obviously. But that's sort of the core sort of sweet spot group generally for this type of giving. The first thing is green is small. So this is cash. So when we talk about cash, you can see it's the smallest piece for every single person at 10,000 and at certainly at 1 billion in terms of net worth. You then look at the sort of burnt orange reddish, that's primary residence. Then you sort of cross over here and you've got light blue, which are real estate that's commercial or investment real estate. And then you've got the dark blue, which are privately held business interests. So I hope visually this tells such a good story that most every, like 99.99% of charities beyond your sophisticated community foundation, and I'm not being that facetious about that at all, 99.99% of charities focus on the green exclusively. It's sort of, if you can consider sort of the top of the iceberg, and then your foundation and others, certainly more sophisticated planning, more optimal planning, are focused on all the things beyond that of these typically, again, more illiquid gifts, or certainly marketable securities for all the reasons that you know. So when I talk about exponential growth, this is sort of the 3 charities. So one I created in 2003, that's a donor-advised fund that does nothing but illiquid gifts. We have 2 evil competitors, and we talk all the time, and they're very nice. And so the only point here is just to talk about the exponential, and that is not hyperbolic, exponential growth in non-cash donations. So if you took three like one more than 2, 3 charities, if you take all of our 990 tax returns and you look at only non-cash illiquid transactions and you mush them, you can see they're collectively in 2010, 108 million. You see the growth every 2 years. 2020 we know is going to be about 2.2 billion. All those have to be filed as of actually Monday is the filing date for the 990. So, but I've already talked with them. It's going to be like just over 2.2 billion to 3 charities, 2.2 billion donated in only illiquid gifts. So we've been doubling every single year since 2014 as an example. So just massive growth in this space. And why? It's a perfect storm in a good way. You've got baby boomers sort of retiring through, selling real estate. Maybe they've done like 8 1031 exchanges on, like I'm kind of done with the 1031 exchanges. We keep rolling basis, which means they have long-term gain in a capital asset. That's the holy grail of charitable planning. Or they're doing business succession planning down to the other owners, maybe junior partners, or the M&A activity is through the roof with these 1% interest rates through, obviously all these acquisitions. So you've got this baby boomer asset transfer that's occurring right into a ridiculously low interest rate environment, which then inflates all capital assets, including real estate and certainly business interest gifts. And so now they have a lot of capital gain. And that's when they're looking to say, how can we take some of this, not all of it, but some of this, and carve it out for charitable purposes to pre-fund perhaps what our future charitable giving goals are, maybe for the rest of our retirement, maybe for the next generation, and maybe for the generation after that, with these life sort of event transactions. So that's where this is coming from. You also see the average value sort of bumping right around that $2 million per gift. So these are not small. We've done about 200, I think just over 270 donations in the last 3 years. The average has been 5.2 million. So They tend to be very large transactions sort of in this space. So just to give you, again, a sense of 3 charities focusing in this. What I find very interesting is literally once you get beyond really the top 10 charities sort of in this space, nobody's doing kind of anything. It's like 1 or 2, 3 maybe transactions per year. Your community foundations, I've heard sort of real estate gifts coming up. Sounds like a plane last year, which actually is quite complex. Some other strip malls, some sort of other commercial stuff. So definitely have the sort of sophistication activity. But generally speaking, sort of for the rest of the 1.3 million charities, this is not something that they're doing sort of at all. So it's hyper concentrated for those charities that have some comfort having the conversations. So asset type, and again, after this one, I'll pause. So any questions sort of that are popping up, let me know. So asset type, so this is important sort of on this slide to sort of set the stage of sort of going one level down, what we're talking about with non-cash gifts. So real estate is about 40% of everything that we see in every form you can imagine. So obviously residential, commercial, encumbered versus unencumbered. So typically debt's not good. If it's less than 30% of debt, there are actually some things that you can do to massage/maneuver. I've got partial versus entire. Technically, that's more undivided interest versus entire interest. I have that for real estate because so many people think that they have to love the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo 100% worth of their farm. They can love you 32% interest undivided in their farm into their fund, whether that's a designated fund or unrestricted or donor advised, whatever it happens to be. And they can then make that as a donation, holding back the amount that they, of course, didn't give away. And then you both go to sale where the Community Foundation is selling their portion as a allocated partner, and then the donor is selling his or her portion. Key point here, big nugget, 75%, 3/4 plus of everything that we do are not the entire interest. It is a partial interest, let's say stock. Dr. Bose didn't give 100% of Bose away. He gave 50.1% of Bose away. Mr. Zuckerberg didn't give all of the Facebook away. He gave a very small percentage of that away. So again, very common for still some advisors to think, oh, this is going to way overshoot your charitable goals if you gave the whole thing away. It's like, good. You don't have to give the whole thing away. You can dial the value you want and then determine the exact, like crazy precision, the exact percentage for the charitable gift that you're looking to make. At the same time, of course, you're using that deduction to help wash out gain that you've held back. And so you can really calibrate that amazingly well from a planning standpoint. One thing I did not include here, this hopefully is expanding your thinking, and I assure you that it will, is domestic versus international. So we currently own 3 international gifts. You couldn't make this up if you were like on an island for 3 days. We own 172 acres in Uganda, like Africa, Uganda. We can't sell it yet. If anybody has an interest in having like a family retreat in Uganda, contact me after this call. We can probably do a good deal. But that's not a joke. We've taken in a $2.1 million farm in Afghanistan, like Afghanistan. The first thing I heard was farm, like, oh my God, they're growing poppies. So they say, no, it's wheat. I'm like, oh, let's just pray it's wheat. So who knows? But anyway, so it's a farm there. We're doing, we think, 2 weeks from now, a very nice resort property in St. Lucia. We own almost $20 million in Belize and Costa Rica. We're doing an estate in France. My whole point here is your clients own these things. And so often they are charitably inclined, and advisors, and mainly the clients, we understandably think, we're not even going to discuss a penthouse in St. Lucia as a charitable gift. No charity will be able to figure that out. It's actually not that complicated to do. And especially in this case, their cost basis is crazy low. They've been renting it every year, taking depreciation and so on. And that's a real key point for real estate too. What do you do to commercial investment real estate every year? You depreciate it. What does it mean to depreciate it? You're lowering your adjusted cost or tax basis until at some point, at least for the depreciable amount, it becomes zero. You've got zero basis, long-term gain asset. We're back to the holy grail lane. That ding, 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 that's what you want to use for your charitable gift. So about 40% real estate. 40% then would be in privately held interest. So that would be, as you well know, closely held C, S Corp, LLC, any of those kind of gifts. My joke is, but it's true, is every single C Corp or S Corp per share, the cost basis is 38 cents a share. It's always 38 cents a share because she always founded it in her garage and it's always successful and so on and so on. So very low cost basis for many of these business interests. And now maybe she's selling to her junior partner or a new outside investor or to a PE group coming in or for a merger or acquisition that's occurring. All of those sort of exits create gain recognition that, if done prior, which we'll talk about, can be hyper optimal for charitable giving. So 40% real estate, 40% privately held stock. Not going to go into restricted stock. That's 144, 145. Key point there is that's technically a non-cash asset if it's over $10,000. Does require a qualified appraisal. Most people miss that pretty hard. Tangible personal property, very small piece of what we see. That's anything, my definition, you can pick it up and throw it at somebody. So jewelry, antiques, and coins and art, all that kind of stuff. If given to a charity that does not put it to a related use, then the deduction is basis, the lesser of, fair market value or cost basis. And for my whole life, this was beaten into me since I was a little baby. That's not true. But my professional life, basis bad, fair market value good. Super quick example. This is a New York case, actually, New York City case. Guy had a painting, $500,000. It was modern abstract art. It was the most hideous thing I'd ever seen, but I digress. And so he had a painting. He didn't like it either. And he said, I'd like to give this to a community foundation during life. And like an idiot, I said, oh, it's probably not a good idea. You need to find a museum or some charity that can put that to a related use to get a fair market value deduction. And then he pushed back, thank God, and he said, I'm 78. I don't like this painting either. It's in storage, and I have to insure it. He said, but I'd like to be able to make this as a gift, and I was planning to give it through my will. And he said, but Bryan, help me better understand something. And nothing good ever comes after that comment if another human says that, by the way. He said, help me better understand something. If I give it to the community foundation now, his basis was $100,000. He'd inherited it from his mother. If I give it now, at least I get a $100,000 deduction, right, at basis that I can use against current income and have tax savings of roughly $40,000. I said, yeah. He said, and then the community foundation can sell that, no capital gains tax, which is still 28%, by the way. That was never lowered for collectibles, plus your state tax, plus his city tax. All that goes away, right? Well, yes. And I don't have to pay insurance and storage for the next, hopefully, 14 years. That's how long I think I'm going to live. Well, yes. And then when the community foundation sells it, what do I have left over in my donor advised fund pot? I've got $500,000 left over that now I can use that as my charitable giving bucket versus cash, bad, out of my left pocket, or even liquid securities that I don't really want to give away now anyway. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Like you would. That sounds fantastic. So a lot of these can be, even if they're taking a basis deduction, it can still work quite well. And let's go to the other side of this. Let's say that he found the museum, he gave the $500,000 painting to a museum, and he got the full deduction. He's like, that's wonderful. So I get a $500,000 deduction. My tax savings is $200,000, assuming a 40% bracket, just to keep, again, the math simple. And he said, option A, I only get a $40,000 tax savings, but I also have a $500,000 donor advised fund that I can use for my giving. So to him, he's like, that's a $540,000 benefit, my tax savings plus my charitable fund. Where to a museum, I get $200,000 of savings. Again, that's great. But then that's it. Now, he might want the psychic rewards. He may have gone to the museum with his grandmother. I have no idea. Lots of other good reasons to do that, but not tax reasons necessarily. So we've actually done very large gifts of wine, which in a weird way is non-liquid but liquid. That's kind of weird to think about. So other kinds of gifts that otherwise from a tax perspective don't seem like they would work well can actually work. We've done a lot of art, but tangible personal property. And then, remember, I'm on the plane, when we're wealthy people, weird stuff. What's the weird stuff? So every single thing in here we've actually done. This is not like a prospect thing and we laughed and then it went away. These are actually completed gifts. In your neck of the woods, the seat on the New York Mercantile Exchange before they merged with the Chicago Merc. That was a weird one. You see the rest. You should know the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation received the entire Kansas City Royals baseball team. The entire team was donated to them in the mid-90s. Not like, oh, it's the autograph booth. No, whole team was given to them. NFL team for us, we actually did a partial interest in the Minnesota Vikings. So it was the Minnesota Vikings Football Club LLC, a 4% LLC interest before they sold in 2006. Dirt we did for the National Mall, can't make that up. So 27 truckloads of dirt. We had to get a qualified appraiser to do a qualified appraisal per cubic yard of dirt. You cannot live long enough to have that happen twice. So that's crazy. And dead animals, we literally did the sculpture of the bull on Wall Street. So that is Charging Bull number 1, went through the foundation. And the other one was for another community foundation, was 88 stuffed taxidermied animals out of an estate. So even going that far is about $400,000 of value. So that's a whole other story I could spend 10 minutes on, and you would laugh, but that we wouldn't get through our content here. So anyway, so you can sort of see all the rest of these kinds of things. My whole hope here is to extend your thinking beyond cash and every one of these weird things, and this is probably a third of what I could have jammed on this little list, were actual gifts that went to actual charities that had actual impact. And for those donors, it worked incredibly well from a tax perspective, again, helping them give a lot more than they otherwise thought possible. So I'll just maybe pause there for half a second. Otherwise, I'll sort of keep chugging. I don't think any other things have come through. So if you do, just sort of throw them in there. So here we go. We're going to do the 5-minute non-cash seminar. So cash bad, everything else good. I've hit that 2 or 3 times, but I want to really emphasize that. Cash bad, everything else good. We've already talked about this. Capital gain property, long-term capital gain property, fair market value deduction, except for that tangible personal property exception, and the elimination of capital gains if given to a public charity. If all of you, and I hope all of you are thinking this right now, well, this kind of seems like if a client gave Amazon stock with a very low cost basis to the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo, doesn't that work the same way? You know it, yes. The big disconnect for many, not you, for many advisors, is they think real estate is in a different lane or a different bucket. Closely held C corporation in a different lane and a different bucket. It's the same long-term capital gain bucket. You give Amazon stock, it's publicly traded. Is it easier? It's a lot easier. I'm not going to give that short shrift at all. A lot easier. But it's long-term capital gain. Full fair market value deduction, no capital gains tax when sold. Okay, that makes sense. How about a strip shopping center in West Buffalo? Could you, if there's no basis, no debt, all good, could you give that strip shopping center to the community foundation, take a fair market value deduction based on the qualified appraiser doing the qualified appraisal, next slide, and then be able to do have no capital gains tax when sold? Yes, it's the same thing. The process is clunkier, a little bit more complex. The valuation is a little different, but it's still a long-term capital gain asset. So for all the reasons people say, oh, obviously, if I'm looking across the balance sheet and I see zero cost basis and it's Kodak stock that's probably not good, but some other stock that's gone up a whole lot, give that. I would instantly give that. Keep looking across the balance sheet because you might find real estate or closely held stock, probably held stock, that have the same very low basis with a lot of appreciation. Any of these things I'm talking about, other than cash or publicly traded stock, to a private foundation during life is a basis deduction. This will never happen. Then you got the 5% payout, you got annual valuation. Oh, that does not occur. These all end up at public charities, primarily community foundations. So when I was in Atlanta, we had, I think, a $190 million fund. Our largest fund by far was all funded by real estate. One donor, all the real estate. There are five known funds at community foundations that are $1 billion or more that had been funded with non-cash assets. The Tulsa Foundation was funded with $3.8 billion from one donor. It was all business interests. You should also know Silicon Valley actually took in, that was about $2.5 billion just in cryptocurrency from one donor. So these are large gifts, obviously, but the point is to expand the possibilities of these other kinds of things when donated to a public charity, that any of those things going to a private foundation would not would not work well at all. I already talked about the pay requirement. And donor advised funds. So many donors, as you well know, they want to be able to say, look, I'd love to do this sort of as one big chunk gift, bunch it to be able to maximize deductions in the year I need it and so forth, make it very easy to do one transfer, one acknowledgement, one appraisal, one Form 8283, and then once it's sold, then to be able to make all of these grants to various places, maybe for some of the initiatives or programs that the community foundation is doing sort of on the discretionary side, or maybe toward a specific other charities they're giving to anyway out of their right pocket with liquidity. Now this becomes the bucket that they can use to be able to make that gift. So being able to do one transfer and then bifurcate all those interests during life and perhaps for the next generation and perhaps sort of for more of a legacy type gift works perfectly. So let's go through sort of the appraisal considerations. I'll sort of move through this fairly quickly too, and that is the appraisal can be done as early as 60 days prior to the donation being made. Has to be done by a qualified appraiser doing a qualified appraisal. Do not mess around with those definitions. Publication 561 goes right through exactly, a little checklist. They make it very easy. Here are all the things that a qualified appraiser must be. Here are what disqualified appraisers would look like in terms of any sort of things that would taint the qualified appraiser. And then here are the 13 elements of what a qualified appraisal looks like. The earliest time, 60 days prior. The latest time is when the donor completes his or her tax return for the year of the gift. What does that mean? That means if I made a gift yesterday of real estate to the community foundation, then I could have had the qualified appraiser complete that appraisal as early as 60 days ago, so back in September, mid-September-ish. Or if I extend my 2020 return, I'd actually have until, believe it or not, October 15th, 2021 to have the appraisal completed. Still retroactive back to yesterday if that was the irrevocable gift date. Why am I spending so much time on this? I cannot tell you how many donors and advisors think two things. One, oh, we have to have the appraisal done before we make the charitable donation. Not true. And the big one I get every single year, and it starts at about right now from a calendar standpoint, is, oh, this would be a great gift, but there's no way we can get the appraisal done before 12/31. I'm like, I don't know why we're talking about 12/31. 12/31 has nothing to do with anything. You've got to be able to make the transfer before 12/31 if you want a 2020 deduction, but the appraisal can happen way after December 31st. So a lot of gifts are not made because of that. Won't go through the pension protect key changes other than to say now if the charity sells that asset or otherwise disposes, within 3 years, they have to complete an IRS informational form called the 8282, which is known as the tattletale form, letting the IRS know what they sold it for. And the other slight change was, actually not slight if you're the appraiser now is the lightning rod. So there actually can be, say this 5 times fast, a penalty for a percentage of the puffery. That's a lot of alliteration there. So if the appraiser puffs the appraisal and the IRS comes in and challenges it, going, whoa, 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 basically it's sort of a tax fraud maneuver, then the appraiser can be personally penalized for a percentage of what that delta is. So just to be careful as an appraiser to make sure that it's a solid, justifiable, defensible appraisal. So next one is if you're saying, okay, I'm sort of drinking the Kool-Aid here a little bit, and why aren't more of these happening? Why are, at least initially, anecdotally, about 80% of these types of gifts are rejected? So here are the big 5 reasons. So the first is the tax and legal complexity. It's more complicated. So doing a DTC transfer of Amazon stock, if it takes you 10 minutes, you've got some coffee or something like Betsy just did. So you go up, get the coffee, and then she probably did. She probably just did a DTC transfer of, there it is, so to Amazon stock. I have no idea. If you're doing real estate, you got surveys, you've got deeds, you've got a title, you might have lease, you've got more sausage-making kind of component to all of this. And the big one is the legal side around a prearranged sale. And I think many of you have probably heard about this, but I really want to emphasize it. This kills probably a third of the deals right out of the gate. The IRS has a rule, I know this is being recorded, an annoying rule, I'll say it, that is around if the donor has already executed a legally binding contract to sell, purchase and sale agreement, lots of signatures, lots of dates, and that's been executed, And after that, subsequent to that, they make the donation to your community foundation. The IRS takes the position that that is an assignment of income, that basically the charity was not given full dominion and control over the gift because now they're compelled to sell under a contract that the donor had negotiated. And basically because even though the gain was unrecognized at that point, it becomes recognized phantom. Oh boy, people love phantom income. Everybody gets sued, right? Because they've legally given the asset away, but all the capital gains tax they thought they were getting out of all comes back and is assigned to them. So what you need to think about and be very thoughtful is to hopefully, and if you can have your clients do this, let me know. We'll own an island somewhere. But earlier in the negotiation process, contact you to talk about some pre-sale planning. A component of that can be a charitable gift, perhaps. But the point is doing it before there's a purchase and sale contract. Now, I'm not giving tax or legal advice. I would say at least half of the transactions that we do are in letter of intent stage, because most donors don't want to make the gift unless they feel somewhat confident that this buyer in the wings or that the process will develop a buyer so that the charity actually can get that liquidity. And frankly, most charities are saying, what is the exit? How do we move out of this to be able to have the liquid funds come in to deploy for charitable purposes? So there's this dance, and so the dance is how far is too far, but once you sort of go over that tipping point, bad things start to happen. So ideally, from a legal standpoint, you would want to make a donation like 12 years ago before you even thought about selling it. Theoretically, that makes sense. Practically, that will never occur. So usually what happens is once you can sort of verbally have negotiations in all 50 states, none of that is binding, and you sort of wiggle down terms enough to say, yeah, I think this may go through. I think, his or her check's going to clear. Then you can make the donation at that point. Key point is that let's say it's a closely held or privately held stock deal, that the charity must be listed on the cap table and in essence be a signator to the purchase and sale agreement, which clearly shows that they owned that proportional amount of those shares before the purchase and sale agreement was signed. Same thing for real estate. The charity has to be the one entering into the purchase and sale agreement. The charity has to be the one who's engaged the broker and, in terms of the MLS listing and so on. So you just have to make sure that stuff matches. The other real quick ones are you got to be very careful about excess benefit type transactions. And often, I can't make this up, but a donor will say, hey, I've got this $500,000 ski house that we used to use that we don't use anymore. We've rented it for a while, so we've depreciated that down. And here's what I want to do. I want to give it to the charity. This happened in New Hampshire. It's an actual New Hampshire case. Give it to the charity, $500,000. And then I want you to sell it to my son. He said this, I swear, in the first 4 minutes of the conversation. I never met this guy in my life. First 4 minutes on the phone. I want you guys to take $500,000 property. I want to sell it to my son for $400,000. No. Hey, that's fraud. Okay. And he knew I was going to say no. That actually ticked me off more. This is true. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. He goes, okay. How about you sell it to my son for $500,000? That's the appraisal. So you're selling it to him for the same appraisal. And I quote, under a 40% non-amortizing 0% loan. No. So be careful about sort of related party disqualified persons sort of gaming some of these things to get some kind of benefit. So IRS very exorcised, understandably, sort of in that space. Environmental issues. All charities think things are going to glow in the daytime and the nighttime the second they get any real estate. That's just, the groundwater supply is going to be contaminated, all kinds of bad stuff. I usually recommend to charities, use some common sense. If you go out to the farm and there are a ton of those blue tanks everywhere, those neoprene blue tanks, there's nothing good ever in those blue tanks. It's always chemicals in those tanks. Oh, it's vitamin D milk. No, it's not. It's chemicals. And if it's like leaking when you drive up and there are like rainbows all in the soil and dead animals are all piled up, you can say, thanks for the offer, probably going to decline this. You can say it nicer than that, but you get the point. Versus other charities, not your community foundation, other charities would say, well, I don't know, we're looking at a real estate gift and we're talking about doing a phase 3 environmental on this property. And I said, what is it? And this isn't exactly the case, but it's pretty close. It's our board chair's house. It's on the 7th green. It's a custom house he built 4 years ago. And we're just really worried about environmental contamination. I'm going, what? A phase 3 environmental basically takes a soil drilling to the mantle of the earth. It's pretty close to that, frankly. And they're trying to determine every animal that's ever walked across that since like the Pliocene period or something. The point is throttle back. So things that otherwise might be risky, there's no gas station or dry cleaner that's ever been on your board chair's property. I mean, that's just craziness. So having some common sense around the environmental issues, and you can get a phase 1 environmental very easily. It's like $600 typically, takes like 7 to 10 days, and you know them because they have clipboards. Very odd, they love clipboards. And the environmental appraiser will go out and she takes out her clipboard. It's like, do I see anything? Check, 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 check. Do I smell anything? Check, check, check. That's a phase 1 environmental. That's basically what it is. So you can do this very quickly versus having 63 meetings about all the potential environmental contaminants that could be on the property. Management issues. So management issues are where basically anything the donor is having to do, the charity now has to do too. So we had a guy, this was in Atlanta, had a 6-unit apartment. And it wasn't 3 minutes in, but about 15 minutes in, he said, look, I just want to give this away. My CPA says I could use the deductions. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. He goes, but it's just driving me crazy. And I paused and I said, what's driving you crazy? He goes, of the 6 units, 2 of them pay great. I love them. They've been there forever. One of them I know is running drugs out of the place. I cannot catch them. I'm getting calls from the cops. They want to put up surveillance and all kinds of stuff. He goes, I don't want to get all hung up in that. 2 units are blown out. So I had leasers come in. They just destroyed them. I'm not putting more money into it. I'm just so sick of this. You take it. I said, no. So it's weird to me that donors and probably other people think that charities have some magic wand in some drawer I have yet to be able to find, that all of your problems on a Monday, that when I get it on a Tuesday, I can just poof it into cash. That guy's not going to run drugs on Tuesday because now a charity owns it. It's like, no, now the cops are calling me. So nothing's changing when it goes from the donor to the charity. And this is always the other duties as assigned that most business officers hate, that little catch-all phrase. Charity's internal process. This kills more than everything else. Not your community foundations, but other charities will have gift acceptance committees. They got to meet 14 times. The average time it takes for most charities to receive and actually say that they're willing to receive or decline a gift is usually 2.5 to 3 months of due diligence. Not your community foundation, but that is on average. Remember I said 75% of deals that we do are undivided interest, not the entire interest. What does that mean? That means the mothership of the Minnesota Vikings is going to sell in about a month. And a minority interest holder had some good advisors say, sit down. If you can spell charitable, if your kids can spell charitable, if you ever want to be charitable again, you bought this interest in 1977, you're selling it now, you've got massive gain, pitch it. Pitch over a 4% interest in the Minnesota Vikings Football Club, LLC, full fair market value deduction, no capital gains, and so on. If he goes back to the charity and they say, oh, this is going to be a great gift, in 2.5 to 3 months, we're going to get back to you with a yes or a no. They're going to go, what? What do most charities need to know? What's it going to sell for? How long is it going to take to sell? What are my impediments to get it sold or in terms of the management during the holding period? That's it. And so those things, generally, I say this with love, don't need to take 2.5 to 3 months to figure out. So anyway, the charity's internal process, my bad joke is I'd rather watch Laws and Sausage Made at the same time, in many cases, than the charity's internal process. Perceived real risk-reward ratio, what is that? Is the juice worth the squeeze? I usually say the big 3 things that you don't ever want to take. 1, anything that eats. If it consumes food, that's usually bad. We took in a horse, wouldn't do that again. Anything that eats, unless you can eat the thing that eats. That's a whole other conversation. 2, anything with a steering wheel. You guys took in a plane. That's actually interesting. So planes can be very complex, as you probably figured out pretty quickly. So Irs Rules 2004 basically anviled all vehicles. So, and yokes and tillers are vehicles. So cars, boats, planes are all sucked into that vehicle rule. They're tangible property. You got to do a 1098-C, all these kind of things that become very complex. So usually, and most people who have cars, boats, and planes, I haven't heard anybody, you guys may have, but I haven't heard anybody say, oh, it's appreciated like crazy. It's always like, it's way lower than what we paid for it. It's like, just sell it and take the loss. Why are we talking about this? Oh, because we can't sell it. It's like, I don't have the wand to poof things. I don't have the poopy wand. So if it's got any kind of loss, it's better just for them to sell it themselves, of course, if they can. Never mind the holding period costs and all that other kinds of stuff. So that's number 2. Number 3, timeshares. Never take a timeshare. And timeshare people always want to tell you about their timeshare, which drives me crazy. It's floating red week number 7. It's like, I don't care. It's 3 bedrooms. I don't care. Whatever timeshare you take in, this is not a joke, 20 to 25 hours a week for the next 4 to 6 months of your life will be spent trying to sell that timeshare, and you will get always $647.14. I don't care what goes, I don't care if it's a Hawaii or West, I don't care. Whatever goes in the top part of that little funnel, $647.17. That is what you're going to get after that period of time. So no timeshare. And has anybody ever heard of a timeshare appreciating value? No, not since the beginning of time. Why are they giving it to you? Because they can't sell it either. No poopy wand. The worst thing off the chart than those 3 is a cemetery plot. You will never, ever be able to sell a cemetery plot. And my bad joke is, I won't look at your faces, but my bad joke is you take a lot of charities aren't giving raises these days. So you take the person who's the oldest on staff. I'm going there. Betsy sees right where I'm going. I see the nonverbal body language. And if you use math, a little less creepy, you can say on a time value of money base. Martha, job you did, performance exceeded all expectations. But before you leave this raise and review, we don't have money to give you. But you're probably actuarially going to pass away before everybody else on staff. So we are going to bonus out to you eternal peace under the big oak tree. Bonus out the cemetery plot. Job well done. You think that's a joke? You're never going to sell that cemetery plot. So you bonus it out to Martha, 1099er, done. That's the only way you're ever getting off your balance sheet. That's the creepiest thing that anybody's ever heard. But I guarantee you, in the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to be sitting at some charity board meeting, and they're going to say, I don't know, we got these 3 cemetery plots. What do we do? And this is all you're going to remember from this whole talk. You're going to go, I don't know. I'm not going to bring it up. I live here. That's creepy. But that's the only way you're getting it off your books. 2 case studies. Here we go. I think we're good. Maybe 3 or 4 minutes on time here. 5 minutes. So this one is 4 doctors. They were senior doctors. They owned their medical building, bought it in 1976. There were 6 junior doctors. This was in North Carolina. 6 junior doctors wanted to buy the practice, and the senior doctors wanted to sell their practice. And every year, there was a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, out of Charlotte that would call them and say, hey, we want to buy your building and do a leaseback. Medical building sale leaseback. Every year they called. And every year the 4 doctors said, no, because our basis is 0, and we're going to sell our medical practice. So we're going to have big spikes in income. And the junior doctors are saying, whoa, you better not sell this building out from under us. This is where our patients have been coming for 35 years. So very quickly what they did was they said, well, wait a minute. Why don't we take 20%, again, not the whole interest, where's my little pointer, 20% to 4 charitable remainder trusts. They weren't all 7%. I only had so many room for so many boxes. So 7% trust. 4 donor advised funds took in the other 20%. So they gave away 40% all out of their estate for estate tax purposes. When it sold, no capital gains tax when sold. They got about a 15% to 20% deduction here based on age and payout, 100% deduction here. And I wish the story could end this way. It's not exactly like this, but all the deductions from all the blue almost washed out all of the gain that they had on the 60% that they held back. They gave away 40%. That means they kept 60%. The junior doctors verbally had negotiated a long-term lease, reasonable terms. They did over beer and barbecue, that's true, at dinner. With the Charlotte REIT people, they wanted a long-term lease, reasonable terms. So they came back to the senior doctor and said, okay, it's okay to sell the building to them because now we know we're going to be able to keep the building, and then our patients will come, and then we'll do a 5-year earn-out on the medical practice. And so in this case, it wasn't perfectly tax neutral, but it was very close, about an 8 to 11% tax slippage based on each doctor for selling the building because of all the deductions on the right side were able to offset, again, the gains. But what also happened? The remainder trust giving them life income for retirement. 3 of the 4 had those pour into the donor advised fund at death. 1 went over to East Carolina Medical University to top off a professorship there. And then the other 20% going into the donor advised funds to pre-fund all their retirement giving using the lowest cost basis long-term gain asset that they had. They were so happy with the whole maneuver. So it worked great for them. This is a horrible thing to say, but I'll say it anyway. A couple things that are very weird about this. You're probably thinking, like, that's weird. Doctors with a good investment, I said it. So they love limited partnerships. You can sell them a limited partnership in a New Zealand emu farm all day long. That's horrible to say, but I said it. The other thing is doctors are usually the worst from a charitable giving perspective, and that's true. Every data, if you can spell healthcare, the worst. Again, that's data. Here, 4 doctors, crazy charitably inclined, had this good investment that was their medical building, but they never even considered that as their charitable gift. Huge point here, huge point. If I'm in Buffalo or Salina, Kansas, or Atlanta, I don't care. I don't care where I am in this country. The most charitably inclined people always privately held business wealth and real estate wealth. Always. Not a trick question. What do real estate people own? I don't know. What do privately held business people? I'm not sure. The assets that they own are perfectly conducive for charitable giving. And what do they give to charity? Cash. They give cash. Betsy knew me when I had hair. That is completely, I have no hair because of that issue. Just like a dandelion blows off the top of my head. Ugh. Final one, S Corp stock. So if you've got clients and they say, I have a privately held business interest, many of you know, odds are good it's an S Corp. And there are more S Corps than C Corps and LLCs combined. Going very quickly back to a C Corp, again, this is what Dr. Bose gave and certainly Mark Zuckerberg gave. Those were C Corps, very straightforward. You can have, let's make up that it's $1 million of C Corp, and let's say that the matriarch founded it in her garage. She owns 70%. Let's say her son owns 10%, daughter owns 10%, key employee owns 10%. You all know right where I'm going. This should be happening so much more. 70% owner, 10, 10, 10. She is charitably inclined. She's been giving cash for the years. And now you as an advisor go, oh, that may not be so good. Let's look to see. Maybe you could give, I'm making this up, $500,000 of C Corp shares to your community foundation for your fund there. And maybe then you take some retained earnings from the C Corp and redeem out, buy those shares back at full appraised value from the community foundation and then retire those shares into Treasury. What just happened? She used the lowest cost basis, highest appreciation, long-term gain asset that she had, full fair market value deduction, all out of her estate. Not a big deal now. Could become a big deal. Who knows? All out of her estate. And then now she's pre-funding her future giving using that as the bucket versus cash. But also what happened, you know what happened? When those shares were retired into Treasury, now the son, daughter, and key employee, 10, 10, 10, own the same number of shares, less shares outstanding. What happened? They actually had business succession planning through business transfer with no transfer tax at all. Well, wait a minute. Couldn't that happen? What if it was a new junior partner buying in? Same thing. What if it's a merger acquisition? Same thing. Any way that you're sort of exiting out of that position, you can use the charitable gift as a way to facilitate that transaction. Works magically. That's C Corp. S Corp. Everything I said is exactly the same. But charities can own S Corporation stock. A lot of advisors still don't think you can. That passed in 1998. Eligible shareholder, public charity. If a charity then owns that stock, donor can get almost always a fair market value deduction for the donation, but the charity has to take a carryover adjusted tax basis from the donor. You're saying, why? Because all of the pre-contribution gain, any post-contribution gain, and any income during the holding period is all UBIT, unrelated business taxable income. So basically, you're not a charity for the purposes of that transaction. You would be, as an example, a New York corporate taxpayer for federal and state purposes. So here is a solution. We do about $100 to $200 million a year just in S Corp because of arbitrage. That's the best word in the English language, and it is French. Arbitrage, triple arbitrage. So we have a trust form, not corporate form, trust form charity in Nevada, so no state income tax. There are others that do this too, so I'm just sort of giving you the solution here. Trust form public charity that is a donor-advised fund. It can receive, in this case, we've got $1 million of S Corp stock. Donor gets a $1 million deduction, just like C Corp. $200,000 of basis. We take that basis. When we then sell that stock $800,000 of that is recognized as UBIT. That's all gain. But because we're a trust, we are taxed like an individual for long-term gain purposes. And therefore, we're at the 20% rate versus the only 21% now under corporate law. But the point is that the 20% long-term gain rate federal, it gets better. We're in a state with no income tax. So now there's no state income tax, there's no 3.8% surcharge, all that sort of goes away. And because we're taxed as an individual, when we then make a grant, we don't manage anything liquid. When we make a grant after that back to your community foundation for one or multiple funds there, just like an individual, we get now a 60% deduction for a cash contribution to another public charity. So when we fill out, which I'm actually doing today, signing today, our 990T, which is our UBIT filing, it would say, did you make any cash gifts to other charity? Indeed, we did. Here's the cash gift over to the community foundation. What does all that mean? That means the 20% tax becomes an effective 8% tax. So if the donor were to sell it him or herself, their personal tax, their state tax, all this stuff, then using the proceeds, bad. This usually saves about 12 to 15% net all-in savings that can be redirected from tax to your community foundation's fund. So it makes it an 8% tax rate versus potentially an effective 23, 26%-ish federal and state. So we've covered that a lot. That's a lot to cover there, I'm well aware. All you need to know is this: cash bad, everything else good. Look further across the balance sheet. Other assets can be more conducive for this. And S Corp, many advisors are like, oh, that's not good. Just sell it yourself. Your tax rate's going to be better than the corporate rate that the charity would have to pay. We legally or literally set this up 12 years ago to reverse engineer the whole model to squeeze down the tax as much as possible to maximize that net gift. So S Corp's in play is all you need to know. Contact Betsy, contact Mary with any cases that come up. So with that, I think I went a couple minutes over. I'll maybe just stop sharing and maybe pass this back over to Mary.
Great, thank you so much, Bryan. Let me just quickly share real, okay. Great. So anyway, thank you so much, Bryan. This has been a really kind of thought-provoking, presentation and discussion. For all of you attending, we hope you're taking away some ideas, and maybe clients have come to mind who may benefit from some of the strategies that Bryan shared. And we hope that if you do have any questions or would like to discuss a particular situation or opportunity, that you'll reach out to us. We'd love to talk through that with you, whether at the end of the day, it ends up something that can come through the community foundation or not. We'd love to help increase the charitable capital in this area, through all supportive means. So we'll be sending out our advisor newsletter called Connections next week, and in that will be a link to the presentation and the slides as Bryan shared, as well as some other articles that we hope will provide some insights into the community foundation and the work that we do with professional advisors and their clients to help them sort of maximize their generosity. So thank you all again for joining us today, and please have a great day. Talk to you soon. Thanks.